Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Dr. Khwaja Danish Hamid, welcoming you all on this day of value-added courses. And the topic for today's presentation is economy and society of the Vedic Age. So, first of all, let me, with the permission of the chair, declare this session open. Thank you to the chair. Good afternoon, chair. The topic will be discussing certain ontological as well epistemological question that deals with what is economy, what is society, how they both are interrelated, and what was Vedic age. So, first of all, we begin with the definition of what is economy. An economy is a complex system of interrelated production, consumption, and exchange of activities that ultimately determines how resources are allocated amongst the participants. The production, consumption, distribution of goods and services combine to fulfill the needs of those living and operating within the economy. An economy may represent a nation, a region, a single industry, or even a family. So, this is a versatile way of presenting an economy and how versatile this definition of economy is. Now, coming to the fact that what is society? The term society is derived from the Latin word socius, which means association, companionship, and togetherness. Thus, society refers to a group of people living together with shared culture, having social interaction and interrelationship. Society has been a system made up of interrelated, interdependent parts that function together to maintain the system as a whole. Human beings are called social animals. We cannot live alone. Family alone cannot satisfy our needs. We need a society where are people similar to us. We feel at home when people is surroundings share common interests, religion, language, and way of life. That also classifies itself for being an ethnic group, which means common religion, common language, common interest, common way of writing, that is script. That is also a part of ethnic group as well, which this is extra which I am adding to you. Being social animals, we live together in a group, in a community, in a society. Society is a must for human being. We help one another, give something to others, and take something from others. In society, there are terms. Society refers not only to a group of people, but also to a complete patterns of norms of interaction that arise from them. It is process rather than a thing, motion rather than a structure. The important aspect of society is that system of relationship, the patterns of norms of interaction by which the members of society maintain themselves. Some sociologists say that society exists only when the members know each other and possess common interests or objects. Thus, if two persons are traveling in the bus, their relationship of coexistence is the same compartment of being same time in the same place does not constitute society. But as soon as possible they come to know each other, the elementary element of the society is created. So this ethos of knowing each other takes care of making a society. The idea of reciprocal awareness in the glimpse of Gilding's definition of society are as number of like-minded individuals who know and enjoy their like-mindedness and are and are therefore able to work together for common ends. So what is now next question I will be exploring, what is the relationship between economy and the society? Excuse me. The relationship between economy and the society are very close. The society influences the economic structure, economic process, which in turn affects the environment of the society. The economy applies goods, services to everyone, whether it is individual, institution, corporation, or the government and its agencies. Thus, it supplies them goods and services in forms of commodities to fulfill basic needs of services in the form of opportunities. The necessity of mankind are the sources of evolution of economy. Therefore, the forms of the forms of the types of economy and the goods and services provided by the society vary from time and the necessity of the mankind throughout history. Those human necessities are governed by culture, laws, environmental conditions, and structure of the society. Being governed by these factors, those necessities define the nature and type of production of economy. The goods domestic production is an index of productive capital capacity of the economy. Economy of the society can be understood in three perspectives. Number one, the economy which is based on the way of sacred resources get distributed within an economy. There are four primary types of economy, which are distribution of scarce resources. Excuse me. They are traditional, centralized, market, and mixed. These four types of economies based on modes of production. They are the Asiatic, the ancient, the feudal, and the capitalist mode of production. These economies are based on the accessibility to the employment security and social security and work security. They are formal and informal sectors of economy. So now after we understanding what is economy and in a wider concept what economy was or is in the Vedic age, we have to understand what is Vedic society. The early Vedic society was pastoral. Cattle rearing was dominant occupation. A pastoral society relies more on its annual wealth than agriculture produce. Pastoralism is a subsistence strategy adopted by the people who live in the areas where large scale agriculture is not feasible due to some environmental and certain extent cultural constraints. Hymns of Rig Veda yield extensive evidence of importance of cattle in the early Vedic society. Many linguistic expressions in the Rig Veda are associated with cow, that is known as gau in Vedic language. Cattle was a chief measure of wealth and wealthy of man who owned many cattle was called gomat. The term used for conflicts and battles in the period of in the period were Givashti, Givasana, and Devyat. The former literally means to search the cow. The term themselves suggested that the possession of cattle was born of contention between groups that led to occasional intertribal fights and conflicts. The Panis, who were the enemies of the Vedic people, are stated in the Rig Veda to have hidden their wealth, mostly cows, in the mountain and forest. The Vedic god Indra was invoked in the to release the cattle. The reference suggests that the cattle raids were common. The Raja or the chief of or the chief is called as Gopati or one who protects cows. In the Rig Veda, Godoli is used as a term to measure the time. Distance is called gavyuti. A daughter is called didutir, or one who milks the cow. Kinship units are labeled as goth. All these terms are derived from the word gaud, suggesting the social relations and all important areas of Rigvedic life centered around the rearing of cows. Literally, reference to pastoral land, cow pens, dairy products, and domesticated animals are also found in the hymns and prayers. Compared to the very substantial linguistic evidence for cattle rearing is in the Rig Veda, agriculture activities find few references. Most of the reference to agriculture are of later date. Apart from Java or barley, no other grains are mentioned. The early Vedic people did not use iron technology. Copper, with which they are familiar, did not have much value in agriculture operations, as iron implements do have. Stone tools like axes are used, and these are mentioned in the Rig Vedas. Fire was used to burn down the forest, covering the shifting agriculture with practice. That is now known as slash and burn cultivation, or also known as ratooning or zooming cultivation. Further, the religion was discussed. Further, the region was discussed receiving low rainfall, and all the rivers mentioned in Rig Veda, that is Satluj, Indus, Ghaggar, Ravi, etc., are known to have changed their courses frequently. Without the facilities of large scale irrigation, which were not developed in the period, the alluvial lands near the river could not have been on a permanent basis. Thus, the hoes, sickles, axes mentioned in the text were probably used for slashing purposes or shifting cultivation. The evidence of pastoralism as well as shifting cultivation suggests that people were either nomadic or semi nomadic. They were moved from their villages with their herds for a certain period of time feed, in order to feed their cattle. The literary and the archaeological sources do show that people did not lead a fully sedentary life. The mobile character of population is seen in the term vis, which also implied a settlement. The suffix punar, upa, pra were constantly used, and the settlements were qualified by them to mean settling near a settlement, resettling, re entering a settlement, or coming back to the settlement. Gift exchange and redistribution had an important economic role in the society. Tribal conflicts led to the payment of tributes presentation, that is Bali, to the victorious chief by the defeated or the subordinate groups. The rest of the clansmen of the victorious tribe had to share in the spoils and the booty won in the war. The chief also fed and gave gifts to clansmen during ceremonial occasion. This was done by him to acquire prestige. Excuse me. Evidences of trade and commerce in early Vedic society is merged. There is no concept of private property and land ownership. The early Vedic society was a tribal society in which social relations based on kinship ties were predominant. The society was not according to the caste lines. And even the Rajas, the Purohitas, the artisans, etc., were a part of clan network. The tribes was referred to as Jana. Many of the references to the different tribes are found in Rig Veda. Intertribal conflicts were frequent. An example being the Battle of Ten King mentioned in Rig Veda. Some of the tribes which fought in the battle were the Bharatas, the Purus, the Yadus, the Druyus, Anus, and the Trovasus. Tribal conflicts are mentioned earlier where were related to cattle raid, cattle thieves, etc. The chief of the tribal was the Raja or the Gopati. He was leader in the battle and the protector of the tribe. His office was not based on hereditary, but he was selected from the clansmen. The warrior category was the Rajanya. Many clans wish that was from a tribe. The clan settled in the village or grama. The base the basic social unit was the kula or the family or kulapa, that is one who protects the family, denotes the eldest male member of or the head of the family. The tribe Jana, the tribal unit Vis, village, Grama, that family that was Kula, head of the family Kulpa, were so were the basic designation of the society. Society was patriarchal in nature. The birth of the son was common desire of the people. The importance given to the male member is reflected in the hymns, where the desire for a son is in the constantly in the prayer. Even though society was patriarchal, women had also important position in it. They were educated and had access to assemblies. There are also instances of women who composed hymns. They had a right to choose their partners and could marry late. However, women were always thought to be dependent on their fathers, brothers, and husband. Education was imparted orally, but the tradition of education was not very well developed in the period. The authors of Rig Vedas distinguished themselves from the group whom they called dasas or dasyusas. The dasas are described as dark, fully lipped, snub nosed worshippers of Pallus of the hostile speech. They were rich in cattle and lived in fortified strongholds. We learned about another people called the Panis, who were wealthy in cattle treasures. The term Panis came to be associated with merchant and the wealth in the subsequent ages. These groups fought and befriended each other from time to time, and one cannot define them as separate racial and linguistic group. Example: the most famous chief of Rigveda was Sudas, who led the Bharata tribe in the Battle of Ten Kings. The Dasa ending in his name might suggest that some link with Dasas. However, the presence of different groups in the same area might have contributed to the emergence of Varna system. Various occupation groups such as those of weavers, smith, carpenters, leather workers, chariot makers, priests, etc. are also mentioned. Chariot makers occupied a special status. There are reference to beggars, wage earners, wages in the Rig Vedas. However, society was economically stratified, and we do find references to rich people possessing chariot, cattle, etc., and making generous gift of them. So now we come how the society was stratified during the Vedic age. We have already read about the declining status of ascendancy of the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins in the earlier phases of the lecture. So the society thus was composed of groups like Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Some of the body of the they are supposed to be some coming out from the body of the god that was known in that age as Prajapati, the universal creator. The hymn of primeval men comes from the later portion of Rig Veda. This hymn for the first time described the origin of four varnas. It says, when they made the man, into how many parts they divide him. What was his mouth? Where were his arms? Where were his thighs and his feet called? The Brahmanas was the mouth, the arms were the Kshatriyas, the thighs became the Vaishyas, and the feet became the Shudras. The symbolism which is projected in the hymns is called Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are limbs of society. However, these limbs did not have equal status. The Brahmanas, compared to the weavers, the Shudras was compared to his feet. So we see that Brahmans were the elites of this society from the knowledge point of view and from the thinking point of view. All the jobs that were done by the Brahmans or related to thinking and intellectual and related to intellectualism. In the social life, Brahmanas were considered to be the highest varna because society should communicate with God with the help of Brahmanas. So we see the rise of intermediaries between the creator and the created during this age. Excuse me. The Shudras, on the other hand, perform menial tasks, including slave captured in war. The concept of Varna system, a very salient feature of the Vedic age. The concept of Varna had following features, that is status by birth, a higher hierarchical ordering of Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, with Brahman at the top and the Shudra at the base. Rules of endogamy and ritual purity were also present in the Vedic age. The Varna system is further tied to the concept of dharma, that is, universal law. The Varna dharma was attempted to establish a social law of systematic functioning of the society. However, Varna dharma society system was not properly developed in the later Vedic society. The social division of social groups was based on occupied occupation alone, and the society was still flexible, whereas one occupation did not depend on birth. Even in later times, that is post Vedic, the Varna Dharma described the ritual status of each group. The Varna system did not prevented the non-Kshatriyas from claiming Kshatriya status and becoming rulers. Example, Nandas and the Mauryas. not Brahmins, form, forms claiming political sovereignty. Example that, wow, this is Sunga dynasty kings. Thus, the theoretical model of Varna system could never be rigidly enforced in the post-Vedic period. It is likely that during the later Vedic period, with the shift of geographical focus, the Vedic people encountered non-Vedic tribes. Considerably interaction between must have helped the formation of composite society. At least the Atharva Ved depicts a host of non-Vedic religious practices which were sanctioned by priests. However, tribal endogamy through strict marriage rules was the aim in order to maintain purity of the tribe. Also giving importance of Kshatriyas and the Brahmins in the society made it imperative to maintain their exclusive superior status as compared to the rest. During the later Vedic period, however, the concept of Varna was rudimentary in nature. The notion of untouchability, for instance, was absent. Now, the Gotra system. The institution of Gotra literally means cow pen, appearing during this period as against tribal endogamy, that is, marriage within a tribe. People practice Gotra exogamy, marrying outside the tribe. Gotra signified descent from a common ancestor, and marriage could not take place between couples belonging to the same Gotra. Now, the family. The patriarchal family was well established, and Grahapati acquired a special status. Since householding economy was gaining prominence, the position of householder too acquired economic importance. The rights to land were based on usage, and communal ownership of land prevailed. The Grahapatis were wealthy, and their rituals role Vastha or Yajmana, etc., that is the one who orders sacrifice, were praised of. The wealth did not came from the gifts, but was produced by their own efforts. Through yajnas, which they were bound to perform to gain merit, a part of their wealth got channeled to the Brahmanas. Despite the presence of some women philosophers and the references to a few queens participating in coronation rituals, women were considered subordinates to men and were not So sorry for this interruption. It was caused because of some technical glitches. So we were discussing about the Vedic society. So now I would just like to explain you, since the householding economy was gaining prominence, the position of householder to acquire an economic importance. The land, the rights on the lands were based on usage and communal ownership of land prevailed. Grahapati were wealthy and their role was Vastha or the Yajmana. That is the that is he who orders sacrifices. He hold he held the commanding position in the Vedic society, as the society was patriarchal in nature. Their wealth did not come from gifts but was produced by their own efforts. Through yajnas, which they were bound to perform to gain merit, a part of their wealth got channeled to brahmanas. Despite the presence of some women philosophers and excuse me, and some and the reference to few queens participating in coronation rituals, women were considered to be subordinate to men and were not involved in major decision making. The three stages of life that the Vedas suggest, or the Vedic age we get from the by the by the sources that were prevalent in the Vedic period, that was Rig Veda, are three ashrams, that was stages of life, was prescribed. Was prescribed. These stakeholders were brahmachari, studentmanship, grahastha, householdership, vanaprastha, partial retirement from householding life, that is living in the forest. It seems that the fourth state also existed, that was sannyasa, or complete retirement from active participation in world. Stages of life was not known till the time that the Upanishads were written. The sannyasis or the ascetics in the later period were individuals who protested either passively or actively against the Vedic structure. So now coming to what was Vedic economy actually was. See, in the initial phase of my lecture, I explained to you what was economy and how it was related to society. Now I'll be discussing Vedic economy in historical context. So in historical context, the early Vedic age was pastoral, cattle rearing, and was a dominant occupation in this age. The pastoral society relies more in its animal and agriculture produce. So it was a sort of a bullock cart economy, which was predominantly agrarian in nature. Pastoralism is subsistently strategy opted by those who lived in these large areas, but but there were areas where large scale agriculture was not feasible to a certain extent, and hence a limited agriculture was practiced during this era. Hymns of Rig Veda extensively yield extensive evidence of importance of cattle in the early Vedic society. Many linguistic expressions in Rig Veda are associated with cow, that is Gau. Cattle was the chief measure of the wealth or prosperity of a particular family or an individual. The person who owned lots of cattle was termed as Gomat. The term used for the conflict and battles in this period was Gavisti, Gavisena, or Gaviat. This means the quest for hunting cows or looking for cows in order to add to their own arsenal, or you can say in their treasury. So cow was a sort of a basic instrument or basic component of the Vedic economy. The Vedic god Indra, also known as Purindar or destroyer of fort, was invoked in the release of these cattle. The reference that we get from Rig Veda suggests that cattle raids were common in nature. The Rajas or the chief, that was Gopati, were the protectors of cows. In Rig Veda, the measure of time was considered in the retreat of cows. So cows were basically the modes and sustenance of life. Kingship unit are labeled as Gotra. All these terms were derived from cows. That had the Sanskritic name as Gau. Literally reference to the pastoral cows, cowpen, dairy products, and domestic animals are also found in most of the hymns and prayers. So, compared to the very substantive linguistic evidence of cattle rearing in Rig Veda, agriculture activities find very few references and limited references, I must say. Most of the references to the agriculture are of later date. The part apart from Java or barley, there were no other crops that had predominant presence in the Vedic literature. So copper with which they were familiar did not have much value in agriculture or implementation as iron had. Copper. This also proves that copper had its presence or registered its presence in Rig Vedic period. So gift exchange and redistribution had an important economic role in the society. Tribal conflict led to the payment of tributes and presentation. These presentation was predominantly known as Bali. So we also find that this presentation represented the subordination of a particular tribe, and it also means that that tribe must have been subjugated and it was overpowered in the battle driven because of economic reason, cow being a basic sustenance, basic unit of economy at that time. So cows were basically forming the component of Vedic economy, and it was important in every mode of life. Cow touched almost every mode of life, that was from having food, from you, its dung being used as a fertilizer and other products. So cow was basically a symbol of wealth in that age, and it really prospered. There was a concept of land ownership, but it was not very rigid. Means the public and private ownership was not evident in this age. So the land was used as a private. Sometime in the it was there was no or you can say sometime it's completely absent in Vedas that there was a private ownership of land. So this leads to us to arise to a this leads us to another question, that was what was property exactly was in that period. That is, what is property? Property laws, principles, policies, rules by which disputes are of the property are to be resolved and by which property transactions may be structured are predominantly qualifying for property. What distinguishes property, or you can say from other kinds of property, is that the relationship between the members relating to that particular thing and how much economically they have invested in that property. It also arises a question. Another question also arises, that how much we have gained from this public and private ownership. Is that public ownership is a communal or collective ownership where anyone can own it or anyone can take anything from that property and can benefit out of it. Private ownership is something an individual can benefit out of it. So, private ownership of property was predominantly absent in that age, and collective ownership was the mode of economy. Barter system was also present, which believed in the exchange of commodities rather than exchange of coins or currencies. There were seals that were discovered in this age relating to, or you can see depicting the exchange of wealth or exchange of commodities in this age. There were also modes of modes of exchange of economy or exchange or sort of what is known as foreign exchange in that age. They had very well developed and elaborate system of economy, and the economy was war footed economy, means it was developed or devised in a militarized way. So now just I will be coming to my conclusion. That is, the status of both the status of women in the Vedic age is still need to be explored. The facts about elites and warrior classes are very well mentioned, but they are not that elaborate in which we can define what Vedic age is completely. The scarcity of sources are another big problem for Vedic people. The the scarcity of sources are another big problem for writing history of Vedic age. Land, cattle, women to a certain extent become resources. And finally, the epistemology and ontology to the topic is still a quest that lacks scarcity of resources. So, with this, I come to an end of my presentation with the permission of the chair. Now, I declare this session open for question and answer with the permission of the chair. Thank you. Any question, any answer, you can ask. You can just type it in the chat box and I will answer that question. Any questions, anyone? Okay, so with the permission of the chair, I am declaring this question answer session closed as there are no questions. So let's sum up what we have gained or how this today's lecture have enlightened us. Firstly and primarily, the history of Vedic age is very difficult to be written as there's scarcity of sources. Rig Veda is the only authentic source that is available for writing the history of Vedic age. The matters of ont- ontologically and epistemologically analyzing society and the economy is a very difficult matter because in this age the society was or the sources are very difficult to be deciphered and decoded and also to be excavated. Moreover, the codifying of the Vedic hymns have been done in much later phase, which lead us to the fact that there might have been certain adulterations or alterations or editing that might have happened in that age. As far as the status of women is concerned in the Vedic age, there were many women priests in this age. There were women who were writing, composing hymns in the Vedic age, and there were also women who were writing who have developed the skills of writing and also were owning some properties. But public presence of women were completely absent, and this also led them to their declining status, as they didn't had any major role in the decision making process. As far as the administrative structure of Vedic age is concerned, it was organized on the military lines since it was predominantly Aryans. It's also very negative, or you can say the British historian or the Orientalist, excuse me, have created a methodology which have portrayed Aryans in such a way that they are to be coming from the top of the civilization. The word civilization is very important over here, because this civilization word leads many of the nations to associate themselves in a particular way, or with a particular society or culture, so that they can assume or amass huge glories and register themselves in history. So this word civilization has been coined, and Vedic age, Vedic civilization and sensitization, another word, is very important, because sensitization also leads to a conclusion that we want to associate ourselves with a particular way of behaving or a particular way of culture, where we where where excuse me, where we are associating with ourselves with others in order to improve our socio-economic status, especially the social status. The Varna system was also another gift of Vedic age, where where the people were stratified not according to the economic status, but also to the profession which they undertook. It was never a fluid state, or you can say fluid category, where there were different professions like brahmanas who had profession of studying, reading, writing, and other brainstorming activities, the kshatriyas who had only profession of fighting, and also known as martial clan of those period. That another was vaishyas who were businessmen, and the lowest was Shudras, who were the people who were belonging to the lowest caste. That means the people who were of the lowest strata, and they were responsible for cleaning and are doing other filthy activities which the normal individual cannot do. The other most important factor of this, the economic and society in the Vedic age, was that economy was based on barter system. Exchange of commodities happened, but the currency system was predominantly absent in this age. We don't come to hear about in the early Vedic period about a currency system or a banking system for that matter. Hence, we arrive to this conclusion that we gain from this debate that Vedic age was an age in which economy was based on largely on exchange of commodities, that is barter system. Vedic age was a society which was divided on according to the Varna system, that became extremely rigid, and untouchability was practiced later on. And this untouchability was had a rationale behind it. The rationale that is given, which I am still trying to understand, was that if a person of a lower strata touches a person of a higher strata, that person must or should or may have communicated certain diseases. The disease or the from which the Indus Valley civilization previously was eliminated by the spread of waterborne diseases or any other diseases, was taken care of in this age. So we see that human beings have learned from the past and have taken steps to eradicate the vector-borne diseases, or the diseases which is caused by, or we can communicate, or you can say communicable diseases, which in which vectors transfer diseases, as well as one infected person transfer disease to another person. So, keeping this in mind, certain scholars have justified untouchability in that period, or must have given some rational like things. So, we don't subscribe to this thing, but there are certain other aspects that are given according to the profession that were taking place in Vedic age. Vedic age was also responsible for the Varna system we see. Some people say that Varna system was created because of economic dimensions. But unfortunately, or fortunately for some, this happens to be true because the lower strata people were not economically well off, means they were not owning cows, or you can say they didn't had any commodities to offer. But at the same time, the question of tribals also come to our mind. These tribals were also living in the forest, but they have forest products to offer, which is inscribed in some of the later Ashokan inscriptions. So this was what we have gained from the today's lecture regarding economy and society of the Vedic age. So with the permission of the chair, may I declare today's session closed? Thank you to the chair. Thank you. Thank you for today.